Hi there, everyone. I hope that this is streaming live as we speak. Um, I'm going to do a couple of checks to see if we are. Any minute now, it should be showing. At least I'm hoping. If you are viewing this, if you could let me know. And here we go. I actually think I am live right now. So hi everyone, welcome to Oceanside Go Read Live, the premiere. I see that we are streaming because we currently have 15 viewers. I hope that grows a bit. My name is Diane Provvido and I am the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, Instruction, and Research. I hope that you can hear this now, and if you can, there's a little chat button on the side of your computer. If you buy a computer, you can just go ahead and send me a message and let me know that you hear this broadcast. So this is the premiere of one of the events that go along with our Oceanside Go Read campaign. It is a campaign being launched by the Oceanside School District, and it's one to celebrate a readerly life and a love of books. And it is one that we are celebrating across our community, not just for our youngest of readers, but for our students, our families, and our community members. I do see 41 viewers right now. I'm hoping that the volume of this is working. So at this time, I'd like to begin by starting our live premiere event, and this was an opportunity to share with you a good book. So we're hoping that parents, you take the night off and allow me to do tonight's reading before bed. And this book was chosen by a number of people who shared with me their favorite stories, and I thought this would be perfect for our first Oceanside Go Read event. The book is called A Bad Case of the Stripes, and it is written by David Shannon, one of my favorite authors. And why don't we get started? Actually, before we get started, I'm just going to go ahead and enter a message here and see if you see it. If you can and you'd like to enter a message, feel free to do so. So, A Bad Case of the Stripes by David Shannon. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. And then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered. "But just look at me." "You get right back into bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he said. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Mr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why you shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. Now, if you don't mind, boys and girls, I am noticing that we are getting quite a few chats from people. I want to thank all of you who are joining. I see that we have Ms. Castiello here, Dr. Zirianis, Mr. Bullis. Thank you, Ellen DeFrancesco. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and continue the book, but I'm glad that you're seeing this well. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. Poor Camilla. The other kids thought this was just great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" And a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called on the phone. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction. And I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes may just be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago, everyone liked her. Now, nobody wanted to be in the same room as her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a really nice plate of lima beans. But she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled. When Mr. Cream phoned the next day, "I think I'd better bring in the specialists. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialists went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and they jabbed and they tapped and they tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grop. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not the chicken pox," put in Mr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialists. They each handed her a bottle filled with different ointments. "Take one of each before you go to bed," said Dr. Grop. Then they filed out the door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different. But when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with a face on it. Her face. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of the specialist, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in all the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded and looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers, then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. It might be a virus. Already. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. Or possibly some form of bacteria, said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotchers. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab, Dr. Gord explained. We'll call you tomorrow when we know something. But the experts didn't have much of a clue, much less a cure for poor Camilla. I'm just going to take a moment and see who here is chatting. Nice to see you, Miss Soper. Thank you for being with us, Miss O'Sullivan. We're excited to have a whole crew here. Okay. So here we go. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out in front of the lawn. Camilla is big news. The Creams were swamped. They had all kinds of remedies from psychologists and allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. Poor Camilla. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with the room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt in the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was the dresser, and two paintings were the eyes. The therapist screamed and ran out of the house. What are we going to do? Said Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. Poor Mrs. Cream. At that moment, Mr. Cream had a quiet little knock on the door. And there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said, with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of the stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these will do the trick. Are those magic beans? Said Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, said the woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you, Camilla? Camilla wanted a big heaping plate full of lima beans, more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the lima beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans, It would taste so good. And being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she had been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The, the truth is that I love lima beans. I thought so, said the old woman, and she said that with a smile. She took a handful of lima beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Said Camilla. Sorry for that phone. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then, the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. And she patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird. But she didn't care a single bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had a bad case of the stripes again. The end. So I hope you liked the book, A Bad Case of the Stripes by David Shannon. I love that I see so many of you here joining me. I see the little number on the bottom, and I think it's terrific that we have viewers. I hope that our Oceanside Go Live readings do become something that we can do often together and meet and celebrate books for all ages. And at this time, what I'd like to do is just give a couple of thank yous out there. First, before I give those thank yous, boys and girls listening to this story, I'm wondering what you think the theme was, what you learned about Camilla, and what she learned about herself. Go ahead and type that into the chat, and maybe next time we could share some of those responses if we can't see any now, but we'll try. Oh, I want to thank all of you. I see that we have so many people here saying that that was a great reading. Thank you all. Do go ahead and share with us some of the themes that you thought came from this book. And maybe in that little chat box, share with us some of the books you might want to hear in the future. We know that we're going to try these more often, and we actually have a few special guests lined up already. I can tell you that you can expect our superintendent, Dr. Phyllis Harrington, as a guest reader. Mr. Capone, the principal of School 2, will be sharing a book. And a whole bunch of surprise readers out there that we think you know and you love will be joining us throughout the year for these Oceanside Go Read live events. I also want to thank Dr. Zirianis, our Director for English Language Arts, and Mrs. Keegan, who is our Elementary Curriculum Supervisor. They are partners in this initiative. They love books and want to celebrate reading amongst our community just as much as I do and just as much as our wonderful staff of Oceanside. And they are the creative minds behind our next big event, which we are calling Oceanside Go Read Hidden Book Hunt. And that starts November 3rd. In order to find out where these hidden books are, because they could be anywhere in our community, please join us on our Twitter site at OSD Go Read, because we will be tweeting out clues all along to help you find where those books are. And if you find a book, it's yours to keep and enjoy. I want to thank Dr. Zirianis and Mrs. Keegan. They are brilliantly creative, and this is going to be a wonderful event. I would like to thank all our elementary principals, our middle school principal, our high school principal, and all the administrators who supported this. A great big shout out to teacher Mrs. Marzacci from School 3 and Mrs. Confredo from the high school, who helped us to navigate YouTube Live and Google Hangouts to make this happen. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the book, and have a good night. I'll see you next time around. OSD Go Read. Good night.